Hi there! Well, today's video is going to be a tutorial on how I like to use the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Palette powders. I use all three of these powders every day. I think they work really well in combination. You certainly can use them individually, but I think when you combine them all together, it creates a really beautiful, subtle, radiant look. It's very simple and quick to do, and I'm going to show you step by step how I like to wear them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the tutorial. I've already applied my foundation and all of my eye makeup, and I've decided to wear a really light tinted lip balm today. I will put all of the details of that down below. So now I need to go ahead and apply the powders from the Hourglass palette, and then I'm going to finish off the look with a Hourglass blush. This is Radiant Magenta. I just purchased this with the Sephora Chic Week sale, and I really love it. It's a very versatile color, and I thought it'd be really pretty with this look today. When I'm at home and I have access to all of my brushes, I do like to use 3 separate brushes for applying these powders. I think they each serve a little bit different of a purpose, so in order to give it a more precise application and a little bit more defined look, I do like to use 3 separate brushes and then sort of blend everything together. So what I will be using today is a Real Techniques. This is the multitask brush. I've also got a Bobbi Brown face blender, and then for smaller precise application I have a MAC 224. If you are traveling or you don't have this variety of brushes, I don't think it's absolutely essential, but it is my preference. So the first thing that I'm going to do is apply a powder all over my face as my setting powder, and I'm also going to put it down onto my neck. So the powder that I like to use for that is here on the end, and this is Dim Light. It is a little bit darker than I would normally use for an all-over setting powder, but I think that it's so subtle that it just adds a really nice bit of warmth, and because I'm careful to blend it down onto my neck, I've really never noticed any sort of obvious look to it or a line on my face. So it really doesn't matter which brush you want to use. I'm just going to go ahead and start with this multitasking brush. What I like to do is apply this a little bit differently than a typical setting powder. I don't just tap it on. I actually like to buff it in a little bit. I think that adds to the radiant, glowy look that these powders already give. And it's just a really simple and quick way to do it. You don't have to be very precise with this. Just get a nice layer of that all over. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have the radiant light down here, excuse me, the dim light down here on the end. So I'm going to get that onto my brush, and I'm just going to start on the lower half of my face and buff that in a little bit. And as you can see, it adds just a tiny bit of warmth, but it's just not overdone. I always say with these Hourglass powders, even the darker one, the Radiant Light, it's almost like a bronzer that you can't overdo. And I do get this pretty generously on my brush, and I just make sure to go work my way down, buff it into my neck and everywhere that you can see outside of my blouse. And just working it into the pores this way, I think gives it just a really nice, soft, glowy look. And apply a little bit more to my brush here and then go up into my hairline. So you can see I'm making sure, I do want to apply this everywhere, and I also like to get it underneath my eyes. I have not found that this settles into lines or creases under my eyes in any way. Okay, and I also like to make sure, I need to make sure I get around my mouth, or that can be a place that will look a little bit more obvious. It will start to look warmer from here on out if I don't make sure to get this area. So just do like that. And make sure to really buff that in. Okay, so you can probably already tell this has warmed up my skin just a tiny bit. I'm sorry, I keep looking past the camera a little bit into my mirror to make sure I'm staying in the right areas. But you don't have to be too precise. Just make sure you do blend down and kind of go into your hairline a little bit. Just make sure you get this everywhere. And so that's that. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is add a little bit more contrast with the darker color, which is Radiant Light. So it is down here on the end. So I start with the ends. This was the Dim Light. I'm going to move down to the Radiant Light for sort of my bronzing color. Again, this is very subtle, but it still does add a nice bit of contrast and warmth. So I'm going to be using my Bobbi Brown face blender for this. This has been a long time favorite bronzing brush for me. Just going to get a little bit on and tap that off. I'm going to do an E pattern on my face, so I'm going to start up here my forehead. I'm going to go around this way, down onto my jawline, and then finally I will blend that down onto my neck as well, just to make sure we don't have any harsh lines. Okay, so starting up here, I'm going to bring that down, come onto my cheekbone, and then down here. And then I will usually just do that a few times. And I like to go just light layers of this and go subtly, because you can always add more, but it's a lot harder to take it away. And I really just want to focus this warmth on the outer portions of my face where the sun would naturally hit. So I'm focusing on my forehead bone here, and then the area right around my cheekbones, and then down here on my jawline. So if you pictured an overhead light, that's where the light would naturally hit, or the sun would naturally hit. And go back with a little bit more of this. And I don't want to go too heavy on my cheekbones, because I do find that that can have an influence on my blush color and then make that not turn out the color that I want it to be. Okay, so I've got this applied how I want it around the edges of my face, and what I'm going to do is take that same brush but not add any more product to it, and then I'm just going to soften it up and make sure I don't have any really obvious edges. I don't want it to look like I have that E pattern. So I'm just going to subtly buff all this in, bring it together, and then come down my neck, because I don't want any obvious lines. But because we already have that first layer of the dim light, I really have never noticed, even out in natural sunlight, anything obvious with this. Okay, and so the final step is going to be adding some highlight to my face. I like to use the middle color here, and this is Incandescent Light. This is a really beautiful highlighter. So I'm going to take my MAC brush. This is the MAC 224. I'm going to get a little bit onto the brush here. And the first thing that I like to do is go right down the bridge of my nose. This is just a really, really subtle way to contour. I don't like to do anything too dramatic, especially for every day, but I do like to add a little bit of definition down the bridge of my nose here. So I'm just going to go down really subtly with that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more to the brush and go right here above my brows on both sides. And sometimes it will come up through the middle here as well. It just adds sort of a nice little focus area and a nice bit of brightness to the center of the face. And then finally, I will take a little bit more, and I like to put it here on my Cupid's bow. It adds a little bit of fullness to the lips. It reflects light a little bit and gives your lips a little bit nicer appearance. So go here and just dust that on. And I said finally, but I'm sorry I didn't mean that. I have one more place that I definitely like to do with this. So I like to highlight the inner corners of my eyes. I have already applied the dim light color under this part of my eyes with that first brush. I'm sorry, yeah, this was the first brush. So I already have a little bit of that on the outer edges. And then I want to highlight that inner corner and right here where I typically get the most dark. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the middle color, Incandescent Light. And I'm just going to come in with my fluffy brush and highlight that area. And this also just really brightens up the center of your face. So I've got that highlight down the bridge of my nose, over the brows, in the corners of my eyes, and then right there on the Cupid's bow of my lip. And I think it really just perks up your face a little bit, but in a very subtle, not obvious way. So that is using an IT Cosmetics. This is the Airbrush Powder Brush. I'm going to apply blush. I didn't think I was going to get that out without stumbling. So again, this is the Radiant Magenta from Hourglass. Just going to get a little bit on my brush here. And I just like to do a little light sweeping motion. So I'm going to suck in my cheeks here and just brush this on. It's a silly face, but it does help you find that cheekbone a little bit. And again, I do always try to start out very subtly and add more as I go. Okay, so I think that'll do it. I don't want a lot today. I'm trying to do a very light look today. I didn't wear a lot of foundation. I kind of focused a little bit heavier of an eye look. And again, I will list all of that down below, but I want to keep the lips and the cheeks somewhat simple today. So that is it. That completes the tutorial and look using the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Palette Powders. I hope that you found this helpful. I thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye.